And hoof care is a large part of that because they get a lot of proprioceptive information from their feet, how they interact with the ground. And she had some pus coming out of her feet that was just nasty. For lack of a better word, it was putrid. And I thought, okay, we need to get some maggots in here.
We've got Daisy Bicking today, all the way from the US, and she's going to talk to us about horse health and care and integrated hoof care. Now, Daisy, as I said, is all the way from the US, but she's also coming over to Equitana, and she's going to be an Equitana educator. So Daisy's going to talk about, she's a renowned hoof care provider, and she's an educator, and she's located at Parksburg in Pennsylvania, USA, and she's diligently served the equine community, founding Daisy Haven Farm in 2014, and she focuses on whole hoof rehabilitation through the application of integrative modalities. But before I introduce you to Daisy, I just want to remind you that this podcast is brought to you by International Horse College, and the mission of International Horse College is to improve the welfare of horses around the world through the safe education of their riders, handlers and trainers. Have a look at the wide variety of horse courses incorporating horse welfare and safety around horses at internationalhorsecollege.com and contact them to speak to one of the friendly staff. Registered Training Organisation 31352. Now, welcome to Horse Chats, Daisy. How are you?
Thank you, Glenys. I'm quite well. I'm happy to be here and chatting with you.
That's great. Daisy, we usually introduce people with an inspirational quote or a saying or some sort of self-talk that you do to yourself all the time, or it could be something that you say to your students all the time. Have you got something there that you can talk to me about?
Yes, absolutely. I do. One of my most favorite quotes goes this way: the important thing in science is not so much to obtain new facts as to discover new ways of thinking about them. And this quote from Sir William Bragg, who was a 1915 Nobel Prize award winner in, guess what, radiograph, in X-ray, he really epitomizes with this statement for me my approach to learning about feet and hooves, because there's so much we still don't know about the hoof. And we have all this information and all this science that we talk about and we debate pros and cons. And yet at the same time, it's really about how we organize that information and what we do with the information that's most important, as opposed to really deeply discovering new things, because we actually know quite a lot, which is amazing, right? So it reminds me to, just be humble about all I'm doing is organizing the information in a way that has helped me help horses, and I want to help other people help horses that way too.
Look, I think that's wonderful. You've been a bit of a trailblazer in hoof care, but tell me something, how did you actually get into this, into hoof care? I mean, you obviously got, a horse background, but, focusing on, and people start off with horses, and they ask their parents to get a pony and everything else. But then they go into different areas, and you've really, really gone into hoof care, not just as a scientist, but as a horse person, I presume. So tell us how you got started. What's the story there?
Yeah, so, I wanted to be a veterinarian when I was younger, but I was worried about being heartbroken, seeing horses suffer. And so I decided early on that I didn't want to have a horse career. I wanted to enjoy them as my hobby and my love. And so I ended up going into art. And I was a sculptor. I made, believe it or not, fine jewelry. And so through that, I was able to acquire horses and build a nice small horse farm for myself at a young age with my young family. And then, of course, like a lot of us that got into hoof care, I've been a farrier now professionally full-time for almost 21 years. And back then in 2003, my horse, who I was competing with and riding and enjoying, his feet fell apart. And he ended up with some pretty significant laminitis. I had a fantastic farrier at the time who actually put the rasp in my hand and said, "You can help me with your horse, but you're going to learn on your other horse first." I had 2 horses at the time. And little did I know that hooves for me were going to be art. They were going to be sculpture. And so I immediately fell in love with it and was able to help not only my own horse, but recognize a true calling to help other horses that had gotten sick like mine. He had, of course, metabolic laminitis, which we were learning a lot about at the time, and started a whole new career. And every day I feel like I get to do arts and crafts, right? Assessing, trimming feet. We do a lot of glue and composite shoeing. And so it's like, arts and crafts day every day. It's wonderful.
Okay, that's great. And you've obviously gone on from there. So that's how you got started. But you've gone on from there. You're not just
Yeah,
someone who's learned to, trim a horse in their own horse. Tell me what
right.
else you've learned from there. And because you're teaching at university, is that right?
Yep.
It's a big jump because, I've lectured myself, and you don't get those jobs just from having your own horse. So tell us a bit about your progression then from helping trim your own horse to then going and through the study and setup and everything else.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, happy to. So, yeah, I felt truly driven to help other people who had horses like mine, and ended up switching careers completely and launched into a basically pretty traditionally minded hoof care business. And from there, the big change for me was in 2007. I was able to acquire my own digital radiograph machine, and which is legal here in the US. If you're not diagnosing, you're just using it for shoe placement, hoof balancing, trim parameters, measurements, basically. And the veterinarians that I work with here really supported me in doing that because I was working on a lot of extreme pathology. And that was my passion, was really sick horses that no one else felt they were able to help. I wanted to help. And what it did is it showed me objectively how much I was interpreting on the outside and then what was actually happening dynamically on the inside based on the work I was doing, trimming and shoeing. And the fireworks were just going off in my brain because I had immediate feedback that was completely non biased about the effectiveness of my work and the result. And I was very fortunate in the beginning. It had been drilled into my head to document all the horses' feet that I worked on. And so I was taking photographs that were scaled, measurable, and comparable to each other over time. Then in 2007, added the radiograph component. And so now had foot photos and radiographs going together that were giving me this amazing amount of information to base decisions on. And in about 2009, so I did that for a year or two for myself and learned a lot. I wanted to share that x-ray machine, the radiograph ability, with other hoof care providers for their benefit because it had taught me so much. And so I was really driven to teach. And so I started teaching. And I'd only been a hoof care provider at the time for about 5 years and full time, working for other people.
I just want to stop you here, Daisy. So, you're sort of saying, "Oh, well, I was only a hoof care provider for 5 years beforehand," but how many hoof care providers take photos, measure them, go out and buy, specialist machine, and put that much detail into their hoof care work? So, while you might have been a hoof care provider for 5 years, you've probably done 4 times more than any other hoof care provider. So you've got like 20 years experience in that time, so I think that's more, and coming on and giving a quote like that, that's the scientific background, the scientist in you. So I can see that you would have developed quite a lot of knowledge within that time.
Well, and it was completely objective. It wasn't my opinion, right? It was, I saw this, I did this, this is what happened. And we needed to decide if that was in the horse's best interest and desirable or not. That was it. So I felt very empowered to share and teach, even though at the time I did feel a little green around the ears. But, you're right. The benefit of that documentation was amazing feedback and advanced my understanding immeasurably, right? So, after teaching since 2009, in 2014, I started the school officially because I wanted to give back to those that had been studying with me for years. I wanted to give them something that they could say, I've mastered this body of knowledge. And I started an endorsement. And then that kind of migrated from there. And at the same time, I was also speaking all over the world and traveling all over the world, teaching and helping other farriers and hoof care providers, helping horses, and have had some really amazing opportunities because of that. So it's been quite the journey, really.
And I'm sure that as you're going now, like you're going, I know you're teaching at Equitana, it's not just you teaching at Equitana, you've got the opportunity then to listen to some other sessions, meet some more people, experiment, see, just see how we do things a bit different here. And there might be products that are available here and not available over there, or vice versa. You might have something, talk to someone here about a particular product which is not available. So in turn, then you're helping Australians with different products or different techniques. So, appreciate you
Yes.
coming all the way over.
Thank you. Yeah. Yeah. I focus a lot on my own education as well. I'm always learning. I like to say that I'm a eternal student and learn something from everyone. And you're right, coming over and spending time in a completely different country, similar feats, similar environments, similar challenges, but a lot of new ideas and different ways of problem solving. It's wonderful to be able to absorb that as well and share equally as well as learn.
All right, now at Equitana, you've got 2 sessions.
Yes.
Do you want to tell us about the first session first? Is your horse a goat?
Yes.
Catchy heading, but
Thank
you're
you.
talking about trimming and glue on composite shoes and how they influence posture. So, yes, if you can talk about that one first.
Absolutely. I'm happy to. So that demonstration will actually be with a live horse, and it's about looking at what posture, how the horse arranges itself in stance at rest, what that tells you about how is the hoof care and other things about the horse actually supporting them systemically over time to minimize or unfortunately decompensate from the wear and tear of life. So it's a complicated way of saying that by observing posture, we can really dial in on how our horse is integrating into domestication. And hoof care is a large part of that because they get a lot of proprioceptive information from their feet, how they interact with the ground. The balance of the hoof affects everything higher up. So the goal of the demonstration is for everyone to be able to observe a horse in a compensatory posture and then learn how, by influencing the hoof balance in a subtractive way through our trimming, and then as needed in an additive way with some creative materials, how we can directly influence the interface of the hoof meeting the ground and how the horse organizes itself above that with gravity.
Daisy, if someone, is thinking about a career or may have even done a little bit of trimming of their own horses in between their professional visit, how would you recommend that they go in and learn more? Or is it like just going out with another provider, someone who is a professional? Not just one, probably going with a variety of them so they can learn bits and pieces from each other and probably, just compare. Because sometimes if you learn everything from one person, you're only learning that person's knowledge. But if you're learning from a few different people, what would you recommend for them to get started if they're thinking about this sort of career?
Yeah, great question. So I learned personally from as many people as I could catch up with. And I have certifications and endorsements from a variety of different places. One is the International Association of Professional Farriers. They do a lot of educational events that are great for different audiences, including those that want to get started. I also have endorsements and certifications from ELPO, the Equine Lameness Prevention Organization. And so, I've tried to go out myself and learn from as many different people as I can, as many different schools as I can. And the benefit of a certification, of course, is in the process you go through in the education to earn the certification. It's not really in the certification itself, right? So if someone wanted to start out, there are so many different ways that you can do that. There's certainly an immense amount of information available through social media and those kinds of things. And that's a good place to start researching educational opportunities. There are a lot of hands-on courses that you can take. There are formal programs you can enroll in. We offer through the International School of Integrative Hoof Care, we offer horse owner courses. We offer more foundational programs where you can dive in on a very in-depth level, but covering your core foundation. And then we even have a professional level certification program that is a graduate level program to, that in depth and with that kind of workload as a part-time investment to really immerse and learn. So my goal personally is to offer different kinds of education that everyone can find something that they want to start with. But there's so many different places you can do that I would encourage someone to learn from everywhere that they can. There's no wrong way, Glenys. It's really amazing how we can help each other now.
Yeah. I think there's two things there, just to do with you said about the certification is the start. And you're absolutely right. All the certification does is say you do it this way and not that way, and this is the safe way and this is the right way. But you go out, you learn your own experience, and your knowledge just becomes so much broader, the more you do it and the more you put into it, and I want to go back to where you were taking the photos and, you were putting the work in. You weren't just going out, getting paid to trim a horse and then coming home. You were doing a lot more about it, so it's not just going and getting a bit of a tick and flick and a qualification, because that qualification or certification is the minimum standard for that level. You want to keep going and keep learning and keep exploring everything. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. The very foundation of our program that we offer is based on horse and human harmony with a whole horse focus, although we're specifically talking about feet and what we do with feet. And in that, my goal is to empower whomever I'm talking to be able to use objective information, pattern recognition, to assess the hoof in a very, scientific, deductive reasoning, and have a lot of confidence in what they're looking at. They can identify problems either before they arise or as they are arising, to be able to then think about, what do I need to do to intervene to help my horse or help someone else's horse? And then thinking about the team members you need to help you implement this solution, which we talk about in depth. And then lastly, be empowered to implement that plan, right? So they can be the steward of their horse or help others steward their horses as part of a team.
Daisy, within your work, you've done some rehabilitation. So can you tell us, I'd love one or two case studies of, just work that you've done with particular horses. And, there may be a horse that everyone else had given up on, but you were able to step in and provide a good news story about that particular horse. Have you got something like that you can tell us about?
Yeah, absolutely. Those are the horses I love the most. It never ceases to amaze me when I have an owner call me and say, my veterinarian said I should call you because you could work a miracle for my horse. Can you help me? And it's no pressure, Daisy. In my head, I'm thinking, okay, great. They've really set me up here. So I better do something great for this animal, which of course, I always want to do anyway. But I tend to get the ones that are the worst of the worst because I love helping them. I love geriatric horses. I love horses who are really, really debilitated in their feet because I can help them turn around. And the joy that I can give back to the owner is incredible. It gives me all the joy, right? And so, and I have a skill set to do it, and I have an x-ray machine. So I have some tools in my toolbox. One of the things I get to do a lot that really makes my heart happy is helping horses that have severe hoof infections. Some days I like to say that I deal with pus every day, which is not ideal, right? I actually get to use a lot of maggot debridement therapy, which is a medical maggot that goes in and cleans up the necrotic tissue. They're these amazing miracle workers in our arsenal of things to combat foot infection. And I had a horse that really was just in very, very, very sad shape. She was a 12-year-old quarter horse that had been a competition horse, and she had had a lot of babies and was so well loved by her owner, excuse me. And her feet were quite laminated, quite foundered, with a lot of distortion and these really bad infections. In fact, I was picking her frog out and it started bleeding because there was raw tissue there near the apex that I couldn't see because it was so packed with bedding and manure and things. And he didn't know better. He really thought he was doing everything he could for her. And he asked me to help him. And so I thought, yeah, I can really help you. And so she ended up coming to our rehabilitation facility, which is Daisy Haven Farm here in Pennsylvania. And she spent about 3 months with me. She was quite body sore, and she really kind of had a depressed kind of attitude about her body language, and her eyes were kind of soft and not really connected. And I knew that she was suffering. And in those cases, I tell the owners to give me 3 months. That's it, because I don't want these horses to suffer. And I said, if I can't get this turned around in 3 months, then we're going to know she needs to go to heaven, and this is her time, and we've done everything we can do. And he was okay with that, because it's important to me that we have an end point for these horses. And so she was here, and I gave her a really realignment trim, tried to get her feet and her ankles better, put her in some disinfecting soaks, and try to get her feet cleaner. And she had some pus coming out of her feet that was just nasty. For lack of a better word, it was putrid. And I thought, okay, we need to get some maggots in here. And so we ended up putting in the first round of maggots, and they went in, they did their thing. They go in for like 3 to 5 days, and they eat only dead tissue. So they're very safe, and their little mouths stimulate new cells to grow. They're these amazing creatures. And after the first day, she started biting the wraps on her feet. She started chewing on them. And I thought, those little guys are in there doing their job. They're in there getting all that dead tissue out, and they're chewing on something she can feel. Now, they're not damaging that tissue, but she could feel it, and it was itchy. When you talk to humans that have this kind of therapy, right, it's itchy. And she was like brighter immediately after like the first 24 hours. And she was moving better, and she was nickering to us, and she was interacting with the other horses across the fence. And I thought, well, gosh darn, these guys are really getting this done. And after that first round, which they were only in for 3 days, which tells you there was a lot to eat in there because they grew really fast, we flushed them out. And the area where that bleeding was in the frog had completely keratinized over. And it was super clean. It smelled astringent. And she did stay with me for another couple months while we healed out the hole, and we, grew out a healthier foot. But I was able to take that mare home to this owner who thought he had no hope for his beloved mare, and present her back to him in a place where she had this amazing life, and he could actually go back and ride her, which was incredible, because I didn't even know if that was going to be possible with the amount of damage in these feet. But she did really well. And those kinds of stories for me, those kinds of experiences are so uplifting. And to be able to give the owner peace of mind that we're doing everything we can, but we're also going to advise them and support them in making the hard decisions too, And this mare did wonderfully, and I'm grateful that I get to help a lot of horses like her. But she really impacted me with how depressed she was, and then how quickly she turned around when we could give her that relief.
Yeah. What I'd like to know is a bit more about the maggot therapy, right? So I've heard of it before, and I can remember that, when I was younger, one of the girls in our paddock's sister, and I'm not 100% sure, I understood she was studying to be a vet, and her sister, so the older sister was studying to be a vet. The younger sister had a horse there and had a wound, and the older sister had done something with maggot therapy, because everyone's horrified, absolutely horrified that there's maggots in this wound, And I've talked to a couple of people about it since, and people are just horrified. So, you're someone who's there, who's using it, who's getting success, who's treating horses with the maggots. Have you ever had, I'm sure you would have had challenges about it, and has it ever gone wrong?
That's a great couple of questions.
I do this podcast for me as well, because I want to learn more. Yeah.
Of course. Absolutely. So the maggot debridement therapy, or when I first started it, my vet insisted on calling it larval debridement therapy because he had a hard time with the word maggot, right? It is by prescription. They are produced at a lab where they are sterile in that they do not reproduce, but they're also sterile in the sense that they are medically appropriate for wounds without introducing new microorganisms. And they are by prescription. So there are definitely times where I've approached veterinarians that I'm working with and said, what do you think about putting some maggot debridement therapy in this wound? Would that be appropriate? And they look at me like I've got six heads, because to them, of course, they find maggots in the worst of the worst, putrid, penetrating wounds, disgusting smells. But for me, I put them in those disgusting wounds. They go in, they clean it up, and it becomes clean. So my experience is from a completely different direction. And in 2011, I actually presented a scientific paper or scientific poster at the Laminitis and Diseases of the Foot conference, which was at the time in West Palm Beach, Florida. It was put on by New Bolton Center, Penn University. And I was fortunate to put this scientific poster about the method of application of maggot debridement therapy that I had developed, because previously the animal would have had to be in a hospital. They would have had to do some significant shoeing and containment in order to put the maggots into a foot wound. And it would have involved a 5 to 7 day hospital stay, which is very, very expensive and stressful on the horse, let alone the owner, right? And so I had figured out a way of doing this in the field, where I designed a wrap that we could protect the maggots, keep them contained in the wound, that it could be done in the field. You didn't have to send the horse anywhere. It was inexpensive. And so therefore it made it a lot more accessible for many more people. And I actually won the Best Content Award out of about 38 scientific posters for this presentation of this material I had put together. So it was really, even then, a novel idea to many practitioners, because it just wasn't done outside of rare circumstance, you know? And since then, I first did my first round of maggot debridement therapy in 2005. And I learned about it from Dr. Scott Morrison at Root and Riddle Equine Hospital. And I talked to him on the phone directly, and I said, I have a horse with a foot infection. I really think this would help. And he coached me through it. And so since then, we've used maggot debridement therapy probably in 20, 25 horses a year. And there have, knock on wood, never been any negative consequences from doing it. Sometimes they don't do as much as we'd like, and we need more than 1 round, 2 rounds to really get ahead of an infection. However, because they only eat dead tissue, if there's nothing there for them to eat, they die. And there's no consequence to there being little maggot bodies like in the foot, because they dissolve into an enzyme that literally is astringent. So they're perfect little creatures for what this application is. And so in hospital settings, it's in people, it's a medical product that's used mostly in people, but we've taken it over to the veterinary side as well. And it's just been amazing. It's such a wonderful gift to have.
Something that you did say I think was key is they're sterile, as in can't reproduce, but also sterile going into a wound, and
Yes.
especially prepared. So it's not just picking up a couple of maggots and putting them in a wound. It's sterile. Yep.
Yes.
So I'm glad we've sort of clarified that, which might help some people who are horrified, that you can say, no, it really is a medical procedure, and that this is how you prepare them. And we don't have to talk about where to get them from, because I think people should talk to their vet if they are interested, and make sure that you do get the right maggots or the right larvae.
Yes. I do understand, though, there is a source in Australia for larval debridement therapy. If that's something that someone wants to look into, they can talk to their vet. Absolutely.
All right. Now, is there anything that, we've sort of covered a fair bit, but is there anything else that you think that I should have included for our listeners? And this could be people going to Equitana, not going to Equitana, but just generally, as far as equine hoof care, anything that is really relevant to horse owners?
Well, we didn't talk about my other presentation.
Oh, please. Yep. Tell us about that.
Okay. So the other educational offering that we have at Equitana is on Friday. I am doing a lecture, a presentation based on developing your hoof superpower, which is X-ray vision. So based on my database of over, at this point, 1 million images, so hoof photos, most with corresponding radiographs that go with them, I've learned that there is absolute pattern recognition, repeatable characteristics that you can interpret on the outside of the foot that will tell you pretty clearly what's going on the inside, what your bony alignment is, and what kind of problems you might be worried about with your horse. Whether you're an owner or a professional, this is valuable information. So this presentation, I'm going to share with you these characteristics about the foot that are completely objective, and you're going to learn X-ray vision. So you can go and look at a horse and say, oh, look at that. I see this, I see this, I see this. I know what ballpark I'm in. I'm going to ask my vet to get some radiographs, or I'm going to ask my farrier to help me understand what they understand about the foot. Or if they are a hoof care provider, how can I learn more about how I can do that with my horses I work on every day? So it's going to be fun. It's a challenge because nobody thinks I can teach them X-ray vision in a 45-minute presentation. However, it's a fun time. There's a lot of visuals, and we have a great time just exploring this idea. And everybody actually ends up pretty much developing a decent eye for these things by the time they're done. It's great.
All right. Well, look, that's wonderful. Now, your contact details. We've got a page. Everyone who does a podcast episode with us has a page on Horse Chat. So it's horsechats.com, and then you'd have to search for Daisy's details. So just do a bit of a search for Daisy, and then you can search for Daisy. You can search for Bicking as well, and then you'll find Daisy's episode come up. And down the bottom of that page, that'll be a copy of the episode and a video when it's ready. But down the bottom of that page, you'll have all the contact details. Now, Daisy, you obviously travel a lot. Do you prefer text, phone, email? What's the easiest way for you?
Yeah, thank you. The easiest way to reach me is either by texting my phone, or by reaching out through Facebook Messenger or through WhatsApp.
Okay. We'll put all those details there as well.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you. And also, of course, just want to make sure to mention that we also have our booth at Equitana where you can come and ask questions. And we actually will have a sitting area where you can come and ask hoof questions and sit and talk and models to look at. And I'll have my database with me where I can pull out case studies or relevant information about what you're curious about. And we can talk hoof for 4 days. It's going to be great.
Great. Looking forward to catching up at Equitana, and we'll see you then. And we'd love to get you back on the podcast and chat some more about hoofs.
Anytime. I'd love that. Thank you so much, Glenys.
All right. Thanks very much. I'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Glenys. Bye-bye.